Welcome back. My guest is the water strategist at the University of Free State, Professor Anthony Turton. And you can be part of our conversation on social media, the hashtag the Modise Network. Now, let me pick up from the naturally occurring phenomena that you mentioned earlier on, that to a large extent is beyond our control as human beings. But we are contributing to the heating up of the planet, isn't it? In what ways, though?
Well, if you go back to when our atmosphere was created, before there was living organisms like you and I are on planet Earth, there was no atmospheric oxygen. And the Earth was a very hostile planet. So there was incoming radiation, not enough atmosphere to shield planet Earth, much like Mars is today. And what happened over time is that you got these little single-celled creatures, these little bacteria. They started, because they can live in very hostile conditions, they started generating the oxygen that we breathe. And slowly over time, the planet absorbed all of the carbon, because we used to have carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That was captured into your sinks that today are your fossil fuels, your coal beds and your oil beds. They were all come from that period of time when we had very high levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. They were sequestered into these sinks. We're now liberating them through the excessive burning of fossil fuel. So we're changing the atmospheric balance again. Yeah. And we're either bringing methane or we're bringing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And it's that the carbon in that. We're upsetting the carbon balance at global level. And it's that carbon balance that comes back again with the nitrogen being the dominant gas in our atmosphere. We are breathing 80% nitrogen right now, you and I. And those two together come back to the same single-cell creatures that gave us oxygen in the first place. Those are the guys that are coming back now and giving us trouble.
And is it a situation that can be reversed?
We always have to believe that we can reverse it. Otherwise, we just, we just become hedonists and we live today for the rest of tomorrow.
Yeah.
So we have to believe in it. Yes, we can. We are intelligent human beings. We can make rational, logical choices. We can make a difference.
But what are the warning signs, though? I mean, these days, the talk from yourselves as scientists and some of those who care, activists and politicians, is that we have to pay attention now. But others could argue that you are being alarmist. I mean, life goes on, things happen. Mm-hmm.
I mentioned earlier on now this event that's currently taking place in Florida, United States of America, this cyanobacterial bloom right now as we speak. You've got some of the top scientists in the world working on that. They've been working on those issues now since the 1950s. And this is the human health implication of the toxin that comes, the cyanotoxins I was telling you about now. The human health implications now are extremely well understood. And we're now starting to do some really sophisticated modeling around that. So this is probably one of the short-term things. While we think that it's going to be a big flood or raging fire that's going to get us, it's actually not. It's these other smaller things that are going to get us. So we are seeing that happening now all over the show. There's some very interesting work that's been done from space now, where they can actually monitor from space, for example, around large lakes. And they're starting to see that around lakes, there's an anomaly in the sense that certain people get certain illnesses that are out of kilter with the rest of society, and they're now starting to put that together with these single-cell creatures again. So we're getting back to this, our capacity as human beings to monitor, to measure, to analyze, and then to extrapolate intelligent answers from that.
But you have said before that in the Southern African region in particular, we've got to pay attention because future wars are going to be around water shortages. And you've also spoken about what you call the water energy nexus. Can you tell me a bit more about this potential disaster?
Yes, the international literature, I'm a scientist, so I'll go back to the literature, whereas the international literature on water wars tells us two things with a very high confidence. Thousands of cases have been studied, and we distill out from this, these two take-home lessons. The one take-home lesson is that water scarcity or rapid change in availability of water exacerbates underlying conditions. So it doesn't cause a conflict, it exacerbates underlying conditions. And the second thing is that we know is that the impact of this is unevenly distributed in society. So if you happen to extrapolate that on top of South Africa, where we already have a highly unequal society, we now start seeing the kind of thing that you're seeing coming out of the Western Cape, etc. So we're not going to have wars between countries over water. But what you're going to start seeing is you're going to start seeing instability inside, loss of investor confidence, loss of jobs, seething anger, growing sort of social unrest, etc. So it's a festering thing rather than a big bang.
So now let's look at the region, right? As much as South Africa, is it in the middle of a drought, or it's just simply a dry country?
Southern Africa is a dry place. The Kalahari, the Kalahari means the great thirst. So we've always have been a dry country, and that's the purpose of infrastructure, is to insulate us from the vagaries of nature. The World Bank did a major study at the time of the World Commission on Dams, and they demonstrated quite conclusively that countries that have managed to decouple their economy from the vagaries of nature are the countries that actually succeed, and those countries that are unable to decouple are the ones that fail. So we have a situation in South Africa now where, because of our infrastructure failure, we are starting to recouple. The whole thing in the Western Cape, the whole debate about should they desalinate or not, that's about coupling versus decoupling. If they don't decouple, if they don't continue to decouple, then they're simply going to be bashed more and more and more in the future.
In a national sense, how should we be managing our water resources? Because we've got mining, we know what it's done with a lot of acid going into the water system in Gauteng and other parts, but just talk me through that.
Okay, in a simple nutshell, we've been managing our water at the moment as if it's a scarce commodity. This is wrong, I believe. This is a mistake. Now, it's counterintuitive, so please let me bear with me now. We manage it as if it's a scarce commodity because we think of it as a stock that's a finite volume in time and space. And the reason for this is simple. The reason is based on Victorian science, Victorian physics, where we know that of all the water on planet Earth, only 2% is fresh, less than 2% is fresh. So we've used up that 2%. But in reality, if we look further than that, the chemistry and physics of water is deeply, profoundly understood by lots and lots of people. Water is not a stock. It is a flux. It moves in time and space. It is therefore an infinitely renewable resource. So we now need to start managing in terms of what I call the paradigm of abundance, where water, by showing respect to water, by creating a policy-enabling environment to bring capital and technology into the water sector, we can start recovering, reusing, recycling water. That is the future. I believe the future of South Africa is actually a very bright one if we go for this beneficiation kind of economy, but then we've got to really get serious about it, because we've probably got to spend something like R1 trillion of investment into the water sector, which then gives us lots and lots of spin-offs in terms of jobs created, taxes that are being paid, improved livelihoods, etc. There's a whole myriad of benefits. So the bottom line is water is an ultimate economic enabler if you manage it correctly. If you don't manage it correctly, it's the ultimate destroyer of economic value.
But now, the cooperation and collaboration between countries in the region still, Southern Africa, right? I mean, we have the Congo River in the DRC, and we've got other water resources in the region itself. But somehow the countries do not seem to be working together in sharing this resource.
That's not quite true. Tim, there's a thing called the SADC Protocol on Shared Water Resources, watercourse systems. It is regarded in the international system as one of the best examples of regional cooperation. So without any question of doubt, there's high level of cooperation within the SADC region.
Well, good to hear that.
No, I mean, we really are. We are regarded by people all over the world. Yes. In fact, the Americans and Canadians have got great attention over their water resources in the Great Lakes than we do here in Southern Africa. Yes. But now looking back here, you mentioned the Congo River, etc. There's this belief now that these are big river systems, we can use them in future. This is not necessarily the best option. The best option is probably to start recovering water from sewage back home, start desalinating water from the sea if you happen to be at the coast, desalinating water from mines if you happen to be inland. So these are all the technologies that...
And are we doing that?
Well, I've just attended a funeral this morning of one of the South African pioneers in mine water desalination. He died at the young age of 48, unfortunately, but he was an absolute visionary and pioneer. He developed that plant at Imalahleni. His name is Peter Gunter, highly respected chemical engineer. So we are leaders in that. In fact, what's very interesting, Singapore is very often held up globally as an example of a water-constrained economy that is vibrant. The significance here being that the solution for Singapore water comes from a Cape Town-based company. Okay. So we are, we know about it. The water recycling from sewage in Windhoek was developed by the CSIR in the 1980s. So we really are.
We do have the technology.
We still have the technology, but there's a lot of pressure on the people that provide the technology.
All right, let's talk about another South African then, Louis Pugh, who's swimming around the British Isles at this time to draw attention to the pollution that's taking place in the oceans. Your view of his attempts to draw attention, and what is he addressing, you think?
I've got very deep respect for Lewis. He's a friend and a colleague of mine. He's an excellent person. He's in fact a South African. He's actually a South African. His father was a Royal Navy officer. But Lewis is an ambassador for climate change. He works a lot at UN level. I would like to see him become an ambassador for climate change in South African waters, becoming champion for this eutrophication and this substance known as BMAA, this toxin that we find in our bulk water supply. I would very much like him to be a champion. But he's a remarkable human being, very dedicated, very focused, and he succeeded very, very well in drawing attention to the plights of our oceans and in particular to climate change.
Now, at a personal, individual level, what can we do? I mean, you're talking big ideas here, big science, and the way you explain some of the things, I understand you, but I think it can be overwhelming to some of us. We feel, well, leave it to Anthony Turton and his fellow scientists. There's not much I can do about it. What can we do? My invitation to everybody is we've got to buy into hope. We've got to have hope, we've got to have leadership. I'm trying to provide that leadership now. I'm working with an NGO called Water Shortage South Africa. I will invite people to join Water Shortage South Africa as volunteers. Here we're trying to offer hope. Not only are we trying to offer hope, we're also trying to offer solutions, but then we're also trying to draw the line in the sand to hold our elected officials accountable. So where they have erred, we want to hold them just accountable in terms of the rule of law. So there is a lot of hope. There's a huge amount of technology available out there, and there's a significant amount of capital, but we need hope, we need vision, and we need to understand what the short-term risks are. So we are launching through the Water Shortage South Africa platform, we are launching a sophisticated education campaign, and we're going to be rolling it out in schools, we're going to be rolling it out with pregnant mothers, etc., etc. We're not very targeted audiences, but it's a vision of hope. It's really, we need to restore hope, we need to restore dignity, and we need to work in partnership with one another. Anthony Turton, thank you very much, and very active in heightening our awareness around these issues. And I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Sure.